Okay, very good. I just announced when I first came in here before the meditation, I'd just been returned from about a 3-week trip over to Southeast Asia, to Singapore and Malaysia, and including the island of Penang, which was affected by the tsunami, which many of you have heard. And even coming back from the airport this afternoon, only a couple of hours ago, you were asked to report to some people in the airport in case you were affected by the tsunamis. And so I dutifully went and said hello. And they said, any trauma, anything wrong with you? I said, nah, come on, I just come from Penang. And the people in that island, it's business as usual. It's not such a big thing. But many people have been asking me about what's the proper response to disasters like that in the world. And so this evening I'm going to talk some about Buddhism, about wisdom and compassion, and just what disasters are and how we deal with them in a wise and compassionate way. And one of the things is not to obviously overreact, but still be compassionate, to get all the information, become wise. And I am pretty privileged, having just come back from there this afternoon, and also just last night that there was a big function. I've got many jobs which I allow myself to get roped into, and one of them is as a spiritual patron of the group called the Buddhist Fellowship, and many of you know them because they came here to offer the katina, or one of the groups to offer the katina to our monks' monastery, and we've got a very strong connection with them over there. Even our President Sol has gone over there to give talks to them, has done very well. And last night they had their dinner for the whole group. It was over a couple of thousand people, must be about 1,000 people were at the dinner last night. But also I was sitting between the Singaporean Minister for Environment and also the Thai ambassador to Singapore. And of course, we were talking about some of the issues with the tsunamis, and these people were very well informed about what was going on. And so have to find out what the appropriate response is. And of course, even though I was not in Penang at the time it hit, I was there a couple of hours afterwards when the plane landed. It was only then that some of the people find out what was going on. Even as one of my disciples over there, they live on a place in Penang called Gurney Beach, which was one of the places which were hit. They didn't know anything about it till they came to the temple, and everyone asked, are you okay? Even my monks from Serpentine, they rang out trying to find me where I was in Malaysia. Saying, is Ajahn Brahm okay? Is he all right? That was very sweet of them to think of me like that, but I am protected. I'm okay. The point of the matter is that people have asked me, why do we have these natural disasters, and what should we do about them, and how can, as Buddhists, we relate to them with wisdom and compassion? So it's a very good story to try and get some sense, try and get some peace. What I said to the minister yesterday evening, I said to him, I must admit that it's my character just to wind people up a bit. And I said to him, have you heard about the second tsunami? He's like, well, what, the second tsunami? He was the Minister for the Water Affairs and Environment in Singapore, and he hadn't heard about the second tsunami. He said, what? What's happening? He was very concerned. And I said, there's another tidal wave of compassion which has been flooding the world. People have actually started caring. And I can actually see that wherever I go, people are trying to find ways to send things, to send resources, to look after, to help. And I say, what a wonderful thing it is. Whenever there's tragedies, it does tend to bring people together. And this is part of being a Buddhist. Whatever happens in the world, sometimes people will say, why does this happen? Why do we have these things? That's not the right question. The question is always the thing, what are we doing about it? How can we sort of grow, learn, create some good things out of the bad things which happen to us? Because too often when people say, why do these things happen? Why do these things happen? I remember one of the teachers of our tradition, Ajahn Sumedho, was once asked this. I think it was the case so many years ago. There was an ordination ceremony in our monastery in England, one of the early ordination ceremonies. And while the ceremony was occurring, a couple of the disciples over there, they were listening to the ordination ceremony. And actually, just by the way, it's an ordination ceremony at Bodhinyana on Monday, just after lunch, if you want to come along. But this thing won't happen to you, I promise, because they left one of their children in the car. They had a little Jeep. And the child was maybe only about 4 or 5 years of age. And no one to this day knows why, but the jeep burst into flames. And as soon as they saw the flames, it was too late to save the little boy. And he burnt to death, only 4 or 5 years of age. Right in the middle of obviously they stopped the ceremony, but right in the middle of doing something wonderful, that happened. And of course people ask, why does that happen? Why does a 4 or 5-year-old boy just die like that? No one knows, what the cause was. It was a very well-maintained car, it just burst into flames. And what Ajahn Sumedho said, he wasn't being flippant about this, he was being very, very wise. The first saying may seem that it's only superficial, but when you think about it and delve deeper, you think, what a wise statement that was. He said the reason why that boy died was because he was born. What he was saying, that for everybody who was born, that we have the future, the destiny. It comes with being born, that we can die at any time, at any place, for whatever reasons. And it reminded me of a story which Ajahn Chah used to say, because there was a man who came to see him who had been drafted into the Thai army and was wounded in a skirmish. He was shot. And he came along to see Ajahn Chah and said, why me? Why did I get shot? Have I done some bad karma in the past? Am I lucky? Should you have given me some more chanting? I've been shot. And Ajahn Chah rolled his eyes and said, listen, what do you expect? When you join an army, that's what happens to you. People shoot at you. That's what happens in an army. It's par for the course. It comes with the job. Like being a monk, sometimes you get stomachache. And say, oh, why do I get stomachache? It's not because I've got a bad stomach or eat the wrong foods. I've got no choice. You just put this food in front of me. Now, if you see the way we eat, and especially when you go overseas, because they all bring you their favourite food and say, Ajahn Brahm, please eat this, please eat this. Don't eat theirs, eat mine. And that's what they say to me. But this morning, this is true, at Changi Airport, that all the disciples, because I'm going away, they like to actually, it's become a custom now to take me to one of the little restaurants there for breakfast. So we got there this morning about, 7 o'clock? And so someone brought me a muffin and a cup of tea, which was really wonderful, just a muffin and a cup of tea. 10 minutes later, someone else came along, and they brought me a bagel, and then someone else came along. That breakfast this morning, no joke, it lasted till 8:45. An hour and a 45. I tried to just eat a little bit, and they came on. The last person came about 8:30, and they'd rushed there. They'd cook the noodles themselves. So, oh, please master these noodles. No wonder I had a stomachache on the plane today. But what can you do about it? It comes with the job. If you want to eat what you want, when you want to eat, and how you eat it, never become a monk or a nun. And actually, I was very impressed when I started reading the original teachings of the Buddha in these sutras. You actually see it on there. Some of these monks say in their stories 2,500 years ago, they used to get stomachaches as well. It's part of being a monk. It's part of being a soldier, that you get shot at and wounded, maybe even killed. And it's part of being a human being, that one can die at any time. What he was actually saying there was very, very profound. We think that we shouldn't die this way, we should die that way. And that's the first thing there, just to please understand what life is all about. It's not a question of, why does this happen? Is this, if you are a human being, there are natural disasters, whether it's mudslides, whether it's floods, whether it's the natural disasters of dengue fever or malaria, whether it's cancers, whether it's heart attacks, whether it's road accidents. Even one of the members here, he lost his son in the Gracetown tragedy. A few people who were under just camping under that rock face down south, and just no warning at all, the rock face collapsed upon them. He lost his son. These things happen. So sometimes we say, why does that happen? It happens because we're born. So what it means is that can happen to each one of us. What does that mean? It means that we know from tragedies like this, it reminds us of our mortality. It reminds us even if we meditate, we eat brown rice and vegetarians and we exercise and we do yoga, we can still die. I got this shock. When I was a young monk, before I actually became a monk, I was into all sorts of alternative things. I was a vegetarian. I was even in a macrobiotic diet for a short while. Anything just to be weird. That was my motto in those days. Into yoga, anything which was going, I was into it. And on the television in Britain at that time, they used to have a yoga program. I remember it's called Yoga for Health. It was made in the United States. And I used to watch it obsessively, like, all these other things I used to watch. And they had this amazing, it was because of the postures, but there was this amazing, beautiful woman on this. I didn't watch it for her. It was for the postures. There's also this incredibly fit guy. He was like young, handsome, and could do all these amazing poses. And just after I became a monk, I was talking to a visitor, from the US. And we just got onto the subject of yoga. And I said, I used to watch that program from your country about this Yoga for Health, what it was, about these amazing guys. Did you know what happened to that guy? This incredibly young, fit, healthy guy. He said he walked off the set one day and had a heart attack and died. Actually, on the set itself. So he couldn't have done. He did yoga. I said, no, even if you do yoga, you can die. Even if you're a vegetarian, you can die. Even if you're a meditator, you can die. Even if you have health insurance, have a medical checkup every week, you can die. So the point is that this has happened. This is par for the course. So please, let's not get it out of proportion. Instead of saying, why does this happen? We know that there will always be natural disasters. There'll be tragedies. There'll be cancers which can't be cured. There'll be children who die in road accidents. I remember one of the saddest funeral services I ever did. I don't think it's been a sadder one than this. Was of I think it was on a Malaysian girl who'd come over here, did her studies. Her parents, she was the only child. Her parents had sacrificed so much to give her an education. She'd really lived up to her parents' sacrifice. She'd done well at school. She got a scholarship to come and study in Perth. She did very well at university, not just partying. She just went there and just really did her studies, got a degree, got a nice job, and then invited her parents over. Because her parents were over in Malaysia somewhere. They were quite poor. Invited her parents over to come and stay with her. And the parents could only speak Mandarin, I think. And they could not, they couldn't understand English. They'd only been here for 1 or 2 weeks. And a drunk driver just lost control of the car. And this couple were just on the footpath in Maddington. They're on the footpath, just being shopping, just being taken by their daughter. The two couple were there with their daughter, and they're doing shopping, and their daughter, just on the footpath, was hit by their car and killed instantly. And these two parents, the mother and the father, they were just inconsolable. Number one, they could not understand what was going on. They couldn't understand a word of English. They'd just come from their country 1 or 2 weeks earlier. And for no reason, it seemed to them, their daughter, the one they'd given so much of their life for, who'd sacrificed so much, and she seemed to have done so well, they'd come to a new country to be with their only family, was suddenly taken out by a drunkard. Why does that happen? You're on the footpaths. You've done nothing wrong yourself. I think the drunk driver never died. Why do these things happen, we say? It's not fair. Why should it happen? Why should so many people going about their business suddenly die in these tragedies of life? Number one, tragedies happen. Number two, if it's a tragedy in our family or in our part of the woods, in our country, in our region, sometimes that we focus upon that to the exclusion of the rest of life. It's a strange thing, the way our perception changes the world. Sometimes we amplify things out of all proportions, for many, many reasons. And that's why the reason is that sometimes if it's your village, or it's your country, or if it's your region, or if it's your family, and it's a huge thing, and you wonder why no one else cares. It's the same with somebody else's family. Sometimes we don't care. Not to the same degree anyway. In the last 12 months there's been huge tragedies in the Sudan, in the southern part of Sudan. The great floods in Bangladesh, which claimed, I think probably, I'm not quite sure, probably more lives than in the tsunami. Just 1 year ago, there was a big earthquake in northern Iran, in Bam. There's been tragedies, there's been wars. But sometimes, why is it we focus on one thing and not another? I always reflect upon that, because as a monk, as a Buddhist, we don't just react, we think about things, we contemplate things. Why do these things happen? I notice in my own case, in my own experience, just how that sometimes we react, attachment, fear. This is my place, my village, or my body, or my parents, or my child, or whatever. Why is it we don't cry over the death of all children? Why is it we only cry at our child's death? Why is it it's only our people, our village? I don't know, perhaps because I've been a monk for too many years now, and I travel around the world so much that sometimes it is not a joke, well, it's funny sometimes, but it's not really a joke. I really don't know what nationality I am. Because, look, I was born in England, and I was 9 years in Thailand, and now, the last 21 years in Australia. Some of my disciples over here say, Ajahn Brahm, you spend more time in Singapore than you do in Perth. And it's true, the Singaporeans, they say, welcome home, Ajahn Brahm. I shouldn't tell you that, but that's what they said when I got there this time. And then over in Malaysia as well. And it's true, whenever that plane lands in Changi, and I see all those people outside waiting for me, I think, these are my friends, my family, I'm coming home. And then you go off to KL, and people have these banners, Ajahn Brahm, welcome at the airport. And I think, isn't this nice? I come into all my friends in KL. And then you go out to Penang, and all these people are waiting, people I've known for years. They look after me, they feed me, and they're my friends, almost like brothers and sisters in the Dhamma. And I think, isn't it wonderful getting to Penang? As soon as you get into the airport, you come across and see those beautiful hills. Isn't this wonderful? And then you go to Thailand, and as soon as the plane starts to land into the Bangkok airport, you see all these monasteries, all their roofs, and these, they call them chaityas, these stupas poking out. I think, isn't this wonderful? All that time I spent in this country, I'm coming home. And then you go to England and see your family, and you think as soon as you go past, I see these old small pubs. You think, don't go in them, I just look on the outside. I think, I'm coming home again. And then finally the plane lands at Perth Airport like it did this afternoon. And you see all of these people on the tarmac hanging around, chatting, doing nothing at all. And I think, I'm coming home again. Although they like the lazy, I shouldn't say that, they'll probably get in big trouble next time I fly. But it's true, isn't it? That's what you see. In all these other countries, they really work very hard on the tarmac. You always see them just standing around there doing nothing. No wonder it takes so long for your baggage to come out. Well, isn't it great to be home again? So I've got all these homes all over the world, and I get very confused about where I'm supposed to belong. Isn't that wonderful? You don't belong anywhere. You're a citizen of the world. Look at how many different nationalities there are in this hall this evening. Our world is changing. It's very hard, actually, to have boundaries on what country you belong to. So because of that, there's sometimes that you have a wider view of things. It's not just my child or my group or my country. Actually, just one of the events which we had last night in Singapore was actually we had a dialogue with a prominent Muslim. The Buddhist and the Muslim were talking to each other. And people said, actually the minister said, he said, the thing we should like most of all of the dialogue was after the dialogue that I think his name was Imran, him and me had a nice hug. I'm not sure you're supposed to do that in sort of in Buddhism or in Islam, but we did anyway, so who cares? I thought, isn't it nice? Just the image of like the Buddhists and the Muslims coming together and sorting out some of the problems which we have in the world. And so the point was that sometimes I really wonder, am I really just a Buddhist? Or is there much more to it than that? Are you a human being, a person with a heart, a person with wisdom? Are you more than just being isolated? The point of this actual train of thought is to show that when you're just a Buddhist, when you're just an Australian, when you're just a Malaysian, when you're just a woman, when you're just a Perthite, sometimes that's all we think about. Our little tribe, our little area. Which means that when our area or our sort of family, our tribe gets harmed or hurt, then we really care. Other people get harmed or hurt and it's not the same. I don't think that's really wise or fair. I think we should be a global community, even like a global religion. There's all religious people, including any atheists, agnostics, anybody, you can all come in. The spiritual sort of global, was it so meditate locally, sort of be spiritual universally. I'm trying to make up a new slogan. It's very hard to make up new slogans on the spot. But actually one new slogan which I found out was actually on the Nike's got a new slogan apparently, which is there is no finishing line. I've seen it on some shirts over in Southeast Asia. There is no finishing line, says Nike, and I disagree with that. I say the finishing line is now. I quite like that. The finishing line is now. Do you understand? Yeah, so finish with things now. You can pick them up again later. If you don't have a finishing line now, you will never rest. If there's no finishing line, my goodness, you're going to be striving, working, racing. Well, it's good news for Nike shoes. They're always racing. They don't want you to stop. They want to keep on wearing out your shoes so you can buy new ones as soon as possible. But as Buddhists, we say, the finishing line is now. So you can finish at any time. You can rest and take it easy. But anyway, going back to about the idea of like the global spirituality, is it means that we don't focus on one thing. And when we don't focus on one thing, we actually even it all out. And then we get the big picture. So I like to be a big picture monk. When you get the big picture, again, you see, this is life. There's not just one life, many lives. When you have like rebirth, reincarnation, okay, then you find out, well, some people die young, some people die middle-aged, some people die when they're old. If you die after many, many years in this life, maybe you have a short life the next one. Maybe a short life, maybe last one, you have a longer one next time. It really depends upon your karma. But if we think, it's so tragic, why did this young person die? If it's only one life, a small picture, then it is tragic. You've only got one go and you didn't get much of a go at that. But imagine the big picture of like Buddhist spirituality. This is not your first life. It won't be your last life. You get the big picture. Yeah, there's a tragedy. But there's many times when there wasn't tragedies. You've had tragedies. We've all been drowned in floods, taken away by tsunamis, crushed in mudslides. So many times, said the Buddha. So we get the big picture and we can actually keep it in perspective. But what is that perspective? Once we stop saying, why does this happen? Why me? We answer that question first of all. Then we're free to ask the next question, which is far more important. And so often people don't go to that next question. The next question is, what are we doing about it? And there's no need to sort of get too sad. Because when we're sad, when we get depressed, it means we're incapable of actually responding in an adequate, wise, effective way. Too often when things go wrong in our life, we spend too much time crying and moaning, why does this happen? And not enough time actually reacting and helping. And this is why that one of the Buddhist attitudes to all things in life, doesn't matter if anything goes wrong, there's always something you can do about it. And sometimes you can turn those tragedies into beautiful opportunities of compassion and care and coming together in life. There's always, actually very frequently, there's earthquakes in the east of Turkey. And I think it was a couple of years ago, there was a big earthquake in Turkey. And at that particular time, I think the Greek government and the Turkish government had terrible diplomatic relations. I think those of you know, because of the invasion of Cyprus, that was the biggest sticking point. Cyprus was divided into the Turkish part and the Greek part, and there was a big wall or fence in between. I know one of my friends that he actually, I think his father grew up there or worked there for a long time, and he landed in one part of the island and he just wanted to go to the other part of the island to see some old friends. He just couldn't go over the wall. He had to leave that island, go back to Greece, from Greece go back to Turkey, from Turkey go back to the island. A journey of like 2 miles had to be like an international flight with 2 destinations, via Greece and then via Turkey to get to the Turkish half. That's how stupid these things are. But at that particular time, there was a big earthquake. And the Greek government were very quick, because they were one of the closest countries, and they had lots of resources to send their army helicopters, ship everything over there with heaps and heaps of supplies. And of course, when it comes to a disaster, you don't care if that's a person you've just had an argument with. You don't worry if that's sort of, they're Greek Orthodox Christians and you're Turkish Muslims. You don't care. You dig in the rubble side by side. You cry together. And you also smile with joy when you find somebody under the rubble who you can keep alive. And the effect of that, as I heard, and as I would understand, was that those 2 governments, they buried the hatchet for a time. They sort of forgot their differences. They were friends, at least in the public level. Something good came out of that tragedy. And I think that, as you would all know, that tragedies in life, sometimes they do give us the opportunity to get something good, something wonderful, something spiritual out of the pain of life. Which is why that I often just brought this down to earth and say, when you step in the dog poo of life, and maybe not in the dog poo, you have a whole truck of dog poo just dumped right on top of you, right up to your ears, that is always the opportunity to take it onto your mango tree, dig it under the mango. But you should always remember that once you've dug in the dog poo, or the cow poo, whatever else you want to call it, once you've dug it in as fertilizer, remember when that mango tree has its fruit and you eat that mango, it's sweet because of the poo. If it didn't have any dung, any poo there, the mango wouldn't be so tasty. So what we're saying is the tragedies of life, the difficulties of life, either the big tragedies or your own personal tragedies. In Buddhism, we call it growing pain. The opportunity to actually to become far more spiritual, far more compassionate, far more wise. It's almost as if those tragedies, that's what they're there for. As opportunities for us to really learn and get to know real life. When we do these things, it's amazing just what happens to communities. How for a while they do come together. How for a while we realize there isn't any difference between whether you're a Buddhist or a Muslim or a Christian or evangelical or whatever you are. There is no difference between whether you're an Indonesian or a Sri Lankan or a Thai or a Penangi, or what's it called, like an Ang Mo. That's the word I learned. You know what that means? That's only for the Malaysians and the Singaporeans here. That means like a white monk. This means red-haired guy. Even though it's not red hair, you've got no hair, but that's still what they call you in Singapore, Malaysia. You know that. See, I've been over there. I listen. That doesn't matter who you are, because when you work together, you are friends, you are brothers, you are sisters. And that's a wonderful experience to have. The tragedies and difficulties make us work together. That's where the best diplomacy happens. That's the best aid. That's the best interfaith conferences. Sometimes we do these things. We go to all these interfaith conferences. We all talk about this, we talk about that, and then we go home and just forget about it. But when you actually have to work together in disasters or building up good things, helping with orphanages, building temples, giving charity, working together, looking after each other, that's when you have not interfaith dialogue, but interfaith living. That's when you have the village boundaries come down, and it's not your village, it's our world. The boundaries between men and women, old and young, this religion, this country and that country, they can all just come down. You travel from one place to another, you get up in the aircraft, you look out the window, and now you find you're travelling over Indonesia. It looks the same to Australia as far as I can see. I can't see it's a different colour like on the maps. I can't see like a line drawn over there when you go from Indonesia to Singapore to Malaysia. I can see those lines on the maps, but they're not there on the ground. And sometimes people living on the borders haven't got a clue because they just go over the border they're just in their village, in their region. All this country business. It's okay for the cricket matches and for the football matches, but we shouldn't take it more than that. We're one world, for goodness sake. We move around. But sometimes we can focus over much. It's just on our little area. I think we really should focus on the big picture of our world. And that way, actually, we can see where we can be active. Certainly, as far as the Minister for Environment and Water Resources in Singapore was telling me last night, he said there's enough resources to help all the tsunami victims, even in Indonesia. Said the major problem for all governments is actually getting it out there. It's logistics. Because as many of you know, that those places which you've seen on the TV, the places where you've seen pictures, they're the places which are easy to get to. Aid, resources will be coming there very quickly. It's the places you haven't seen on the TV. The places where no newspaper has ever gone yet. They're the places which the governments know exist, and that's the places which are very, very hard. I know the Singapore government told me that they've already sent 2 helicopters over to the far west of Indonesia, to the isolated communities, because that's the only way to get there, with helicopters. Why did they send? Because he's a Minister for Water, 2 big tanks of water. And this is actually what we mean by helping. Finding out what's really going on, and not just being compassionate, but being compassionate and being wise. We need to have both of those things. It's not just saying, oh, it's a terrible thing, what should we do about it? How to do something about it. Don't just feel guilty and get into this guilt trip. Oh, I should really I'm okay. I've got a nice house. Isn't it terrible? I should go and do something, give a donation just out of guilt. But the thing to do is actually to see how one can really, really help. And this is actually how one can really, really help. Is actually seeing the heart of the problem, understanding what's going on, and also learning that these are opportunities to grow spiritually. Compassion doesn't come from listening to a talk. Yet wisdom doesn't come from reading the books and getting a degree from a university. Wisdom is learnt from the experiences of life, and compassion comes from the hard times of suffering. You should know that from your life. Every time you've really experienced suffering, it's an opportunity to grow in compassion. Your wisdom you learn from life. The books are given like a guidelines, a handbooks, but you've got actually to put that into practice in your life, your experience, to really understand why those words are there in the first place. And this is how one learns. Great opportunities. And so what is the opportunity for people here? It's not just to be compassionate and kind, but please think that that's you, swept out to sea. The person out there who was, and I remember I read one girl who was clinging to an old door and got washed back again in Indonesia. She survived. There are many people who didn't. That's you out there. Imagine what it's like. When you imagine what these things are like, there are certain things in your life have more meaning. Other things have far less meaning. For example, all those arguments you have in your family. Those little things which you think about so much. He said that and she did that and my kids didn't do the right thing to me this evening and they're not doing their homework. They're not doing well in their exams. They should be studying more instead of just watching the video games so much. And the boss at work's asked me to do so much. My finances aren't well enough. If I only win the lotto this weekend, then everything will be all right. There's one of those stupid things we tend to think about all the time. And I must get home early enough tonight to see this TV program or that movie or whatever else it is. Why do you think like that? Sometimes tragedies really bring focus to our lives, what life is all about and how short it is. You don't know when that's going to happen to you. I'm not trying to make you afraid. I'm trying to make you more vigilant, more caring, more wise, to make sure you make use of this life in a much better way. Life is not just having parties and getting drunk and watching the cricket and just cheering your team on because they're winning or just cheering somebody else on. Is that what life is all about? Is life all about just bringing up your children and make sure they all get doctors and engineers and make sure they're all wealthy? Is life just getting all your relationships in order so you find your soulmate in life and live happily ever after? They didn't last happily ever after. And soon one of you dies. We leave each other. It's not just getting the big house. What do you want a big house for? Big houses mean big mortgages. Or it needs big cleaning, means big headaches. Big gardens mean no time to come to the Buddhist center in the weekend. If you want a big garden, go and walk in King's Park. If you want a swimming pool, go down by the beach. It's much cheaper. So, I'm sorry for all the real estate agents here this evening. I'm not trying to sort of kill your business. What I'm saying is just get some priorities right. And anybody who's been in those areas, actually you see what the priorities were. Again, I was in Penang, and there's something about 60 people died there. I just arrived a couple of hours after the tidal wave hit. They're just getting back to normal. I really respect. They're Buddhists in the Penang Island. They're going there. Somebody lost this person. Somebody lost their beach house. It's all gone, swept away. Yeah, okay. We'll rebuild it. We'll rebuild our lives. Life goes on. Obviously, other places were more devastated. But you find the resilience of wise and compassionate communities. They go on. I certainly realized that from the tales which my parents told me, and my grandparents, because they lived in London during the Blitz. This is a time when it was like a Twin Towers every evening, literally. The hundreds, thousands of bombers were coming over, dropping bombs which could go anywhere at any time. You didn't know where it was going to hit. And I remember my mother telling me that you've seen these little terraced houses in England. Everything is so small and compact in Europe. In one of these small terraced houses, which may be about, maybe 10 meters, no, not 10 meters, that's a lot, maybe 8 meters wide, from wall to wall, and then you get the next house. So one night, the bomb fell on the next house. And it killed everybody in the next house. And of course, having a bomb go off about 10 meters away from you, just my mother, her whole arm was sort of cut by the glass. My grandmother was terrified, just ran out of the house before it just collapsed. But that happened to everybody. Even my memories of my grandmother, who lived through that time, every time there was a thunderstorm, she'd have to stop whatever she was doing. She may be cooking or watching the TV or just talking to us. She had to stop, and she'd go to the stairs leading down the house, and she'd sit on them until the thunderstorm finished. She could do no more or no less, because during that time she was taught that the safest place in your house was on the stairs, which were made out of either concrete or stone, while the rest of the house was made out of bricks and was not as firm. And sometimes you saw many buildings had collapsed, but the stairs were still there, because they were the strongest part. And she learned that during the Blitz, the Second World War. And it was so ingrained in her that even when those thunderstorms passed by, all the flashbacks to that time came back to her. But she's such a wonderful lady. She acknowledged that, and she lived a very wonderful life. She's a very caring and loving granny. So the thing was, we incorporate tragedies in our life. It's not just our tragedy, not just my family. It's all of us tragedy. When we understand that, we get to learn to live with that. We can accept these things. We accept them. Yes, tragedies happen, tsunamis happen, floods happen, plagues happen, all sorts of things happen in life. When you're born, you're going to die at any time. So, what are you doing about that? They say that the human life is very precious. This is actually part of Buddhism. To actually be born as a human being is a very, very rare experience. And so understanding that, we don't waste time. We make use of this life to learn, make good karma, be good people, to become wiser, more compassionate. And these are our lessons which keep prompting us again and again. They're wake-up calls. And we need to wake up more and more. Soon it will be the time of Perth. Some tragedy happens over here. I know that some years ago we were almost wiped out in a bushfire. I was right in the middle of it. And was it 1991, I think it was. Huge explosions. If you've ever been in a wildfire in Australia, this was a big one. Still to this day, that was the second hottest day recorded in Western Australia. At the actual time when the bushfire came for us, it was the hottest day. As a couple of weeks later, the temperature went a little bit higher. The second hottest day in the history of Western Australia, there was a bushfire came through our monastery in Serpentine. I think it was something like 46 or 47 degrees that day. And that was before the fire came. So obviously after the fire came, it was much hotter. And it was there at the time. Just all these trees exploding. It was like bombs going off. Because you should know that in the eucalypt forests, when it gets that hot, much of the eucalypt oil just evaporates. And it forms this explosive mixture around the trees, oil and air, just waiting for a spark. It's an explosive mix. And when it goes off, it's like a bomb going up. I remember my predecessor, Ajahn Brahm, because he was away at the time, but he came just when the fire had already hit and we'd been evacuated. And he went to argue with the policeman at the roadblock. Let me up there, he kept on asking. And just as the policeman said, "Look, it's too dangerous." He said, "That's my monastery. I demand to go up." And the policeman said, "No, you can't." And then there was a big explosion of one of the trees. He said, "Do you really want to go up there?" He said, "Okay, no." But actually, you see what's happening over there, and that's frightening. Those are natural disasters. Sometimes you die. But I always remember afterwards that we had, because we were in the heart of it, we got quite a bit of media coverage. Two interesting things happened. I was obviously, that evening, was interviewed for the, I don't know, Channel 7 or Channel 9 news. And later on, the lady who interviewed me, she rang up later on. She said she now works, for those of you who've been around a while, she now works for the Hinch program. Remember Hinch? The Hinch Report? And she said, "We want to do a segment on you for the Hinch Report." And apparently that's really sort of a very dodgy program. So I said, no. I said, "No, look, we want to do a good thing," because she said that we interviewed you after, I was the interviewer. I interviewed just after you'd been evacuated. And they said, "You guys weren't scared. You weren't traumatized." So everybody else, she'd been doing this job for a long time, so they haven't been able to get you out of my head because you weren't afraid. You weren't sort of blaming anybody. And she wanted actually to know why. And a few weeks later, we had a team of psychology students from Curtin University who came to interview us. And because I was there at the time, they gave this big questionnaire, sort of, can you sleep at night? Do you have dreams of fires? And I said, no. And And when you get the psychology students were really disappointed because we weren't traumatized, so they just had nothing to do. So why is that? It's incredible just how Buddhists can actually take things in their stride. Why is that? Because we got the wide picture, the big picture. When we do have some poo in our lives, we don't start complaining about it and overreact. You say, yeah, okay, this happens. If you live in the eucalypt forest here in Australia, you are going to get fires. That's why we're prepared for it. We understand it's going to happen to us. We don't say, oh, why did a fire to come to our monastery? Who can we blame? Let's go and sue this person or sue this person. Who can we sue today? We don't try and blame anybody. We say, okay, yeah, this happened. It's part of the course. You get born, you'll die. So that's what we're doing about it. So eventually we straight away started rebuilding. Actually didn't need to rebuild much. Only a little bit was damaged in our fire. But we just get on with it. Get on with life. That's being effective. Sometimes people think, oh, you Buddhists are really cold. You're heartless. No, you've got a big heart, but a wise heart, which really just works so hard, works your butt off, basically, for other people, caring for them, looking after them, but in a wise way, and an effective way. So with these tragedies of life, are they really tragedies? Or is it just the way we look at these things, the word we give to them? Sometimes, that words have such a lot of power. Sometimes when something happens, we can get caught up in it. And I was just mentioning about my predecessor, Ajahn Brahm. He's a very wise man, a very wise monk. And I remember one occasion how I was so impressed with him. Just his psychological skill. This particular occasion, I was a monk in Thailand. At this time, he was the abbot of the monastery in Thailand, Wat Nana Chat. One of our disciples had a cancer, a very bad cancer. She was actually the wife of one of the chief disciples of our monastery in Thailand. Would always come once a week to give dana. She got a very bad cancer. The husband tried everything, all these Chinese pills and everything else to try and heal her. And then one morning, her best friend came to the monastery while we were having lunch. And Thais are usually so respectful of monks. If they're eating, they just go outside, wait for us to finish. But she burst in to the hall. She didn't even bow. And she said, this lady, Sutin shot herself. She's committed suicide. And she was so upset, waving her hands around, screaming, while all the monks were having their meal. And because Ajahn Brahm at the time was the boss, the abbot, we were all looking to see what he's going to do. He just looked up once and then looked down his bowl and carried on eating. Now, it's not that the food is so important for monks, because this is what happened next. He carried on eating. He said, she's killed herself. She shot herself. He didn't move. He carried on eating. And then her arms went up less. Her voice started modulating and not being so loud. And after 5 minutes, she was just sitting down there. Sutin's killed herself. When she was calm, Ajahn Brahm put his spoon down in the middle of his meal, looked up and said, what's happened? It was brilliant. The emotional intelligence of that monk at that time. He calmed her down. Because she was overreacting. It was a suicide of her best friend, yeah. But the emotional turmoil in her mind was not really at all useful. Understandable, yes, but not really useful. Not the right time to explain what was going on and why and what you should do next. Just too overreacting and creating all sorts of problems. Actually adding to the problems, not solving them. So very beautifully, he calmed them down. Calm. In 2 or 3 minutes, she was calm. And then he said, oh, what's happened? And then this is what we can do next. I think that day he only ate half his meal. But he waited. He carried on eating just to calm her. That's a beautiful thing to do. Sometimes when a tragedy happens, we just need that piece of calm. We just need that focus, the ability to see things deeply instead of when we get emotionally overreacting. We never can see anything clearly. We try and help. We just add to problems. We try and do something and we say, why isn't anybody doing anything about this? Why? Shh. Let's find out what needs to be done first. Because with that calmness, with that wisdom, then compassion can be just so powerful, so effective. It may not look as caring and kind as people who just run into there straight away. I'm going to help you. I'm going to hug you. Don't hug me. I've got disease. Adding to the problem. Whatever it is, that sometimes our responses are inappropriate. We've got too much compassion, but not enough wisdom. So, in all tragedies in life, there are opportunities for us to learn, opportunities to grow in wisdom, and opportunities for us to grow in compassion where it really counts. So whether it's a tragedy of tsunamis, whether it's a tragedy of earthquakes, whether it's a tragedy of cancers, whether it's a tragedy of accidents, whether it's a tragedy of whatever happens in life, learn from it. Stand back. Don't just focus on your own. Focus on the big picture. See the whole world, because tragedies happen every day. And help where you can, but help evenly, wisely, and compassionately. And it's not just for others, it becomes also for you. As you help, so you get helped. As you cool down, so you get wise. And you are preparing yourself for the next one. Preparing yourself for your own tragedy. Old age, sickness and death, said the Buddha, are suffering. But only when we have craving does that create the suffering. When we have the wisdom and the compassion, what once should be seen as intolerable, now we can tolerate it. What once we thought was incomprehensible. How can that happen? How can hundreds of thousands of people just die like that? What was once incomprehensible, now we can actually comprehend. We can understand it. We can even see its purpose. And also, we can grow from it. I know the great explosion of Krakatoa. The last time there was a huge, because there was an article by some author, it's in the Straits Times, that's the Singapore paper, about a person who wrote a book and researched this huge explosion in Java, or just off the coast of Java. Some was about 100 years ago, I think. He said that so many people died, but then all that ash which came from that volcano which covered Java, that was one of the reasons it became so fertile. It's as if the destruction always gave way to life as well. I know that in Thailand, when there were monsoon floods, some people died. Many crops were washed away. But the farmers told me at the time, it doesn't matter, next year we don't have to pay for fertilizer. The fertilizer came with those floods. The silts and the mud which was left enriched their fields. Is that natural? People have been around for a long time, understood nature, worked with nature, and understood that nature takes away but also gives back as well. They were in tune with the cycles of life. Fascinating, but I really respect such people. So we learn, we understand, we accept, we give, we're kind, and we grow. That's life. So that's just a few reflections this evening on the tsunamis, because everyone's been talking about them. And again, we'll talk about them probably for another week, and then we forget about them, and then until another disaster happens. Hopefully, we'll become wiser, kinder, and grow more at each time we have the opportunity to learn. So that's a talk this evening about the tidal wave of wisdom and compassion which is sweeping our communities, I hope. So, any comments about this evening's talk? Comments or complaints or questions? Okay, if so many die all at once, where do they go? Is there a traffic jam up in heaven? Is there a big queue? Like sometimes when the last time I came back to Perth Airport, not me, it was actually waiting for one of the monks, Ajahn Brahm, who was here a few days ago. Was Ajahn Brahm? Yeah, I think it was. 3 planes arrived at the same time. And his was the last. And being a monk, he didn't really rush out, so he was the last one out. We waited for a couple of hours, 3 hours, I think, for him to come out of the aircraft. It's a big queue in immigration and customs. Is there immigration and customs when you go to heaven after you die? Do they check what you're carrying? Have you got permission to come into heaven? Is your visa all stamped yet to go to heaven? Or you haven't done enough karma? I'm sorry, you haven't got a visa yet to come in. Actually, what usually happens when a lot of people die, some people who die who are wise, they know what's going on, they're prepared for death, they know exactly what's going on, they can let go and just go on to their next rebirth, no problem at all. But some people, it's amazing, just they get confused by their sudden death. I think confusion is a big word. Sometimes they don't know if they're dead, why they died. So very often there's ghosts around after a major tragedies like that. There's unknown places in time where there's been floods, where there's been major tragedies, and the monks have to keep going back there because sometimes the ghosts, because they're not ready to die, or they think they're not ready, they should be, my goodness. We should always be ready to die. So sometimes they linger around there for a while. That's why you always get priests or monks going around, whether it's to the places in Bali where the bombings went off, or into the beaches in Phuket and Thailand. There'll be monks there pretty soon doing ceremonies. And probably be in Indonesia. The Muslims will be going to those places to do ceremonies. In Sri Lanka it will happen as well. In India. Because all that is actually when a person dies, you know exactly what's going on, leaving their body. Sometimes they just need to be given a bit of a nudge into their new life. Come on. Let go of this world. You're dead now. Come on. Remember all the goodness you've done. Let go of your family and your possessions. Now's the time to go on. Releasing the ghosts from their attachment to this world. Sometimes you have to do that when so many people die at the same time. And the other question which people ask as Buddhists, is it when people die all at the same time in one big event, is that like group karma? And sometimes I know that according to the books, there's no such thing as group karma. We're all each the individual of our karma. What you do doesn't affect me. What I do doesn't affect you. But again, there is, in a sense, a group karma. Like all of you have come to listen to the Dhamma this evening. You've all come together to do something which is really good. So isn't it the case that sometimes we receive the fruits of that goodness together? Sometimes you have like armies. They go into battle, but not just a battle. They go and destroy a whole village together. They do like a great war crime, we call it these days, together. Sometimes they receive the fruit of that bad action together. Sometimes you have gangs who go and rape or steal or even kill. They do it together. Sometimes they receive the fruit of that bad action together. So yeah, in that sense, there is such a thing as group karma. Sometimes that's what happens. So thank you for that. Any other questions or comments? Yeah. Oh yes. Sometimes that's in accepting, is it sucking the juice of the orange to the full? In other words, doing as much, if I understand your question, doing as much as you possibly can while you've got the time. Because are you saying that, I know this is one point which comes up very often, does it mean accepting, you just sit there and do nothing? Oh, just accept, people are going to die anyway, what's the point? We're not going to be proactive. Is that the question you meant? Okay, again, it's because that sometimes that we overreact. You say, just we have to be more accepting. But accepting does not mean you're inactive. and you don't respond appropriately. The point I was trying to make is sometimes when we don't accept, we spend too much time crying, trying to find reason why, and getting depressed, that it incapacitates us to actually respond appropriately. But perhaps the best answer to that common complaint about Buddhism, that Buddhists are just too inactive, is that little story I've got in my book of Opening the Door of Your Heart, which comes from an anecdote from the time of the British Prime Minister Harold Macmillan. And you know that story, many of you, but I'll say it again here. During the 6-day war between Israel, and there was Jordan, Egypt, Syria, I forget who else, Lebanon probably as well at the time, that Harold Macmillan was asked, he was an ex-Prime Minister, was asked, what do you think about the problem in the Middle East? And he answered the journalist, "Sir, there is no problem in the Middle East." The journalist responded, "How can you say that? There's a war on as we're speaking." And the Prime Minister, ex-Prime Minister, said, "Sir, a problem is something with a solution. There is no solution in the Middle East, therefore it can't be a problem." Now, that was such a great saying. You realize the meaning behind it was, if there's something to do, then it's a problem, do something. But if there's nothing to do, that's where we have to have the acceptance. And a lot of times, the life and death, tragedies. How can we stop sort of earthquakes and tsunamis? Tsunamis will happen, and even with warning systems, sometimes the warning systems will never be perfect. We can have scans of women's breasts and people's prostates, but still there will be cancers coming on. We try and do our best, but we have to also have acceptance. And just from what I've heard over the last few days, what I've read in the newspapers, there isn't sufficient acceptance of the tragedies of the tsunamis. And I think that is hindering the relief effort. Too much hand-wringing, not enough using your hands for other purposes. I don't know if that answers your question, but does that sort of answer it? Okay, getting towards it. Okay.